Hello friends, welcome back. Welcome back to Strategic Management, and we are talking about environmental sustainability and business sustainability in coherence with each other. Last session we tried to build up a case around how business sustainability is actually nowadays dependent, or it has always been dependent upon environmental sustainability, which somehow we did not consider to that extent, or even if we considered, we created irreversible processes which we could not eliminate in due course of time, because somehow we have been doing legitimate business and we are going for all the compliances which are required. If you will go into the details of litigations which organizations they have been fighting, despite of availability of the compliance formats, and they are complying to that, despite of that they are fighting litigations which are concerns related to environment and so on, you would realize that we could have gone for a step further in considering those things and accommodating those things in our strategic steps before someone could have pointed out. Someone could have said that this is adversely affecting me. For example, the initial cancers which evolved because of some things which could have been avoided because organizations could have considered that somehow. If that could have happened, we could have gone for a different kind of a strategic approach and strategic steps, and we could have been considered a different kind of an organization. And ultimately our goal is to achieve a dominating situation amongst our competitors and the value chains and the value webs, largely amongst all. Basically, we want loyal customers, loyal human resource, we want a self-propelled process at the end of the day, and we want prosperity and opulence. If we want that, then somehow we could have considered that. What authors say, we have been considering that. Last segment I talked about what the textbook talks about, and now I am extending that argument in terms of what do we mean by sustainable business practices, which we started discussing in my last session, wherein Kellett, Thompson, Strickland and Gamble in their book Crafting and Executing Strategy, the Quest of Competitive Advantage, have suggested that how should we be looking at sustainability with reference to sustainable business practices. And the title of the book includes the quest for competitive advantages, which means that authors, they imply, with all their intelligent thinking and a lot of research, they imply that somehow if we could have considered these factors, this would have given us a very large competitive advantage, which we have now practically started realizing as of now. So they build the argument further and they say that one aspect of sustainability is keeping use of Earth's natural resources within levels that can be replenished via the use of sustainable business practices. I extended this argument in front of you in last session that Earth has started expressing its limitations now. The rivers, they have started expressing their limitations now, and that is what authors say, that Earth's natural resources within levels that can be replenished. If we would have given some time to Earth to replenish its resources, using those, then keeping back for a while. I would not digress too much in saying that if we would have gone for supply and demand relationship rather than demand and supply relationship, this could have been achieved somehow. You may think about this. I have just given you a food for thought at this moment, that there was a time there is a reference to these kind of things in classical economics, and especially what Mahatma Gandhi, our own Bapu, used to say, that you produce which can be somehow utilized by all, and if somehow you feel that at a particular stage the requirements of all the people around you whom you can support and service is fulfilled, then you can direct your energies and competence to producing something else, generating a supply for something else and fulfilling the demand accordingly. And micro and small medium enterprises are based on the philosophy of what Bapu used to say. Whole of the world talks about it, whole of the world admires that somehow. If we could have focused upon this kind of an approach through our strategic pathway passage, even if we are a large industry, we have, for example, an engineering oriented organization has an engineering core competency and acumen. They could have directed or redirected their thought process towards producing few other products, which were engineering oriented rather than just focusing upon scaling up the production in terms of almost everything they wanted to go. Definitely there are competitive issues associated with these kind of things, but then if everyone is thinking the same way, then this could have been a different kind of a competition rather than just product focused competition. I am not challenging the intelligence of people associated with these kind of procedures, which are large, scaled up and now practically irreversible. But at this juncture, and being into the field of academics and talking to so many researchers around the world, when I try to collate whole of this thing, this argument seems to be logical. You might agree with me. Then authors further say that another aspect of sustainability concerns containing the adverse effects of greenhouse gases and other forms of air pollution to reduce their impact on undesirable climate and atmospheric changes. Were the organizations thinking in terms of climate and atmospheric changes which their actions might produce in due course of time? They are intelligent enough to understand this. I would not say that they deliberately overlooked that, but somehow they had all the information, but somehow they were thinking that this might not come so soon, and that might have affected the whole thinking process of whole of the industry basically. If one industry leader would have started thinking in those kind of terms, and that industry leader or that organization would have been credited because of that, then whole of the situation would come up in a different kind of situation. That is exactly happening right now. When environmental reporting is going on by different organizations, they are being credited for different things which they are doing in terms of environment protection and augmenting their procedures, and that is adding all on to their customer retention, organizational value, their stockholders value and everything which they are doing as of now. It is happening right now. There are some compliances which have been generated around this, these kind of reporting measures. They have been advised to the organizations. Somewhere in some countries it has become mandatory. India is also taking a lead as far as these kind of reporting procedures go. But then it is now. Let's see how fast we can go for that. Other aspects of sustainability include greater reliance, as the authors say, greater reliance on sustainable energy sources, greater use of recyclable materials, the use of sustainable methods of growing foods, habitat protection and environmentally sound waste management practices. Do you think that these 4 lines are associated with the scenario which I presented in front of you in my last segment, wherein I was talking about Ganga ji, our own Ganga, wherein I was talking about construction, wherein I was talking about tire industry and all those things which I presented in front of you. So, do you think that authors are exactly trying to mention that this is how we could have gone for? And I would be coming to you with a different orientation, extending this argument in a short while from now, but just try and think that how this could have been done. I will try to present that, what authors say about it. So, now we are using a very important source, Srivastav and Hart. Professor Stuart Hart is a very important contributor in the thought process which I am trying to extend here in front of you, and he has written very important books on whole of this aspect with a strategic orientation. Here we are using Creating Sustainable Corporations, Business Strategy and Environment and the Environment, and we are using this this text for extending our argument. Although if you wish, you may go for reading very important book which he wrote in a couple of volumes, that is Capitalism at the Crossroads, a very important contribution, and he has been propelling this thought around this world for quite some time now. And Professor Stuart Hart, Professor C.K. Prahalad, as I have always been telling you, that they have contributed a lot in this thought process, prosperity, opulence with sustainable environment and business sustainability. He talks about designing sustainable corporations. So, he says that genuine corporate responses to the environmental challenge require the transformation of all aspects of the organization. Please mark these words, and I would be extending this argument on the basis of this phrase, transformation of all the aspects of an organization. This transformation must address every dimension of the organization. You see, a very categorical, very specific statement which actually takes us towards looking at the complete entire strategic vision which we have, complete strategy, whole of the strategy, the long term path which we have designed for ourselves, the planning which we are which we do for our organization, the objectives we define, the mission we conceive, the objectives we define, the goals we have, the strategic steps which we go for, and so on. So, transformation of all the aspects of an organization, and this must address every dimension of the organization. Dimension of the organization means all the functionalities, all the aspects, all the elements which organization has. It is a difficult task, but it is now required, and he could conceive that long back. You see, he was talking about this in 1995, and he would have started thinking about this much earlier, because this came in 1995. That means he had been working on this for decades before that, at least a decade or two, or kind of, and he would have been nurturing this kind of a thinking, and so many other authors, they have been talking about this. This is an important contribution, that is why I have referred to this. Key elements of organizational design including: 1, what kinds of organizational elements he wants us to consider. One is mission, corporate and competitive strategies, how to look at our own business, our own industry with this kind of a perspective. Core competencies, you see, core competencies, we have been saying that what kind of a potential we have in terms of acumen, what we can do best, which cannot be imitated about. Professor C.K. Prasad has contributed a lot in terms of our understanding of core competencies. But then Professor Hart talks about that core competencies should be redefined in an organizational space with the perspective of environmental sustainability and sustainable business. Then fourth element he adds is structure and formal systems, how to structuralize our organization itself, and that is an important aspect basically. Organizational processes and culture. Do we talk about this? Do we care about this? Do we always wonder about what we are trying to do as far as the situation goes? I can go for several ironical situations which I have seen in different forms of different kinds of discussions and forums which I have been attending on this subject area, wherein we were talking about different kinds of environmental aspects, once with reference to business, and all the intelligent people, they were consuming water from plastic bottles and were talking about sustainability, and somehow someone raised that point, and everyone was perplexed what to say. Very, very small element, not related to organizational perspective at all, but an individualistic cultural aspect. What kind of individual behavior we are having in terms of being the part of that system, first of all, then how are we developing the culture in our organizations which look at these things with that kind of a perspective and orientation. You see, today we are multiplying number of screens. I am not saying that the organizations which are producing computers and screens should stop working as they are basically, but we could have generated material and methodologies through which a limited number of screens would have solved a larger purpose. I am not saying that screens, I am not an expert on how screens or computer systems are contributing to as far as environmental pollution go and what kind of a recycling is happening. It is a debatable point, and I am not an expert to comment on that, and I apologize if I am overstepping, but and there is a disclaimer that I am not denouncing that. But again, the point is that somehow we could have thought of this process when we were actually generating this process, and this is what precisely authors are trying to say. Then he adds on another element, performance criteria, which is one of the most important elements for any organization to think about as far as their environmental responsibility and business sustainability goes. Are we focusing upon the sales volume only, or we are focusing upon producing products, living with the customers, and having a mutual gain in due course of time, enhancing the profitability, the ratios which our accounting books would show, and still living with the environmental values and so on. So, how to revisit the performance criteria, changing the measurement scales. There was a time when people used to say that health is above 1000 gifts of nature, and we know the genuine element of what Bapu used to say, and that is in Hindi, which I would decipher for you up to with all my limitations. There is a quote which he used to always talk about, साईं उतना दीजिए जामे कुटुम समाए, मैं भी भूखा ना रहूं साधु भूखा ना जाए. That means I should be generating resources for myself which are enough for me and people around me somehow. So that kind of, and this is not contentment, you can progress with this, you can bring in prosperity, because if you will create circles of prosperity around you basically, and there are several large circles of prosperity, that means whole lot of world is prosperous and opulent. This can be seen when we are at the same page, and that is related to augmenting our measurement criteria. What do we think in terms of the measurement of the success of an organization? That is what Professor Hart wants to say. For a corporation to approach sustainability, these design elements must be focused on social environmental performance, social and environmental performance. Here I wish to mention Dr. Anil Prakash Joshi ji, who is Padma Bhushan and a very regarded environmentalist of our times, and has been on the board of governors of board of directors of IIT Roorkee, Indian Institute of Technology Roorkee as well. And with all his efforts, he has been focusing upon gross environment product, a measurement criteria which governments should adopt, and the state of Uttarakhand, where I stand here, has adopted that measure along with whatever measures we are using in terms of GDP and other measures also. So what kind of environmental elements we should be focusing upon on measuring our prosperity basically. Just to briefly mention, he fondly says that up till the time the tree is standing, we might not include that in our measurement criteria, in economics measurement criteria, or considerations like, for example, whatever measurement criteria we are using for as far as our development goes. But when the tree is cut off or it falls down and we use the wood for some converting it into some product, then we convert that into our developmental criteria. So we can consider the life of a tree with reference to its economic contribution in our lives. That can be done. It is a very fundamentally important thought which I thought that I should be extending in front of you. Further, the authors say that focused on social environmental performance and be internally consistent and self reinforcing. We believe in that. Strategy is all about belief, cultures, core values, which we have talked about. So the point here is that when we say that we have to augment the complete process, which Professor Hart has talked about, that we should revisit our mission, corporate competitive strategies, core competency, structure and formal systems and so on. So we should be drawing the complete value chain afresh, and then we should be focusing in terms of, for example, we are producing X kind of a product, we should start from that what kind of a material we should be using, not according to the availability of the material and the cost feasibility associated with the material, but the environmental sustainability element which the material is associated with. If somehow we could have done this in case of plastics, the world would have been quite different as compared to what it is now, and we would have different concerns as compared to what we are having in terms of reusage of plastic, or let's say we don't have a concrete solution on what we should be doing about this. So material, then the processes, that is production, in between there are several other elements to the value chain and so on, and then every stage we should be focusing upon revisiting that. Could we think in terms of, when we were thinking in terms of scaling up the production of goods, could we think in terms of actually curtailing the utilization of machinery to an extent, somehow not going, increasing the scale, but not going for utilization of several kinds of machinery which would actually require natural resources. Somehow we could have gone for a mix of manual or kind of automated automation and so on. Could we think in terms of that? Probably we could have done that somehow. If somehow we could have thought of looking into the traditional practices and retaining those to an extent, and then adding on some modern element of as far as automation and those things go to complement the traditional practices. not to replace the traditional practices, which I am proud and I am happy that Indian knowledge systems, the mission which has been generated by Government of India, is actually doing now. We are looking into Indian knowledge systems and traditional practices so as to rejuvenate those processes which were very effective, very advanced, with the perspective of the demonstration which Bapu has done always, which GEP intends to do, and so on. Further, Professor Hart adds that for designing sustainable corporations, we should be thinking in terms of mission, which he mentioned as a point. So, he says for mission, we should be thinking in terms of that sustainability requires fundamental changes in corporate mission. It requires corporate missions to be oriented towards long-term global and environmental concerns, which most of the organizations they have now. But how well we are following that is a major concern, because we are unable to replace the processes which we have generated. In addition to seeking financial gains, companies must actively seek harmony with the natural environment to leave the fewest possible footprints on the planet. GEP makes an important, or will make an important contribution in times to come. The philosophy associated with GEP in actually containing or developing such kind of a mission and objectives associated with that. One of its primary stakeholders must be nature, both in the regions where it operates and globally as such. There are several kinds of documentaries which are available on different platforms nowadays, which actually demonstrate how this world is connected, deeply connected, and how a resource of one country is associated with the resources of other countries, and so on. Further, he adds in terms of mission that to be sustainable, a corporation must thus have a strong sense of social environmental purpose or strategic intent, which provides the backdrop for its corporate and competitive strategies. Strategic intent would have defined the steps and made our business more sustainable along with the environmental sustainability, and would have brought in larger strength from the side of customers and stockholders, which I have repeatedly been saying. Corporate and competitive strategies, he further adds that sustainability requires that environmental and social responsiveness infuse strategies both at the corporate and business unit levels, decision making level from the top, and the business actions at on the ground. Environmentally sensitive corporate strategies compel organizations to exit environmentally hazardous businesses and enter into environmentally friendly ones. Professor Hart advocates the change of entire business as such, which we might be doing in due course of time. And that is where I started in my last segment, that when Mr. MC Mehta filed the first PIL around the pollution in the courts, in Supreme Court, several businesses had to vanish, and they definitely would have started something new. If they would have deliberately done that, costs would have been low and their business would have gone for a different kind of a developmental trajectory along with the happiness, prosperity and opulence of all. And that is what Professor Hart is indicating at this moment. Core competencies. If a sustainable strategy is to be successful, he further adds, the underlying technological capability or core competence of the corporation must be reconfigured to support this strategy. Core competence of the corporation must be reconfigured, reanalyzed and reconfigured to support the strategy. This will necessitate an internal audit of the technological and human skills and capabilities and the reallocation of resources towards those technologies which meet the criteria of total environmental management, minimization of energy, hazardous materials, waste and life cycle cost. That means not going for extreme automation if it is not required, just to scale up the production. And it is the pressing need today as well. Structure and systems. He further adds that sustainability holds significant implications of organizational structure and systems. Example, reward, resource allocation and information systems. Together these systems help build the institutional capacity to realize the mission and execute the strategies. A strong environmental affairs office, and he advocates that we should have an environmental affairs office, not just the compliance office, with direct ties to top management is necessary for sustainability. You see, here he is indicating that environmental office should be a line function. Equally important is the alignment of organizational systems with sustainability. A very, very important thought which he went for extending at the right time actually. Organizational process and culture. He adds that it is very important, it is very important to the quest of sustainability. Organizational culture and processes are central to explaining the occurrence of environmental crisis in companies. Sustainability requires different organizational cultures and processes, we have talked about that earlier. Cultural values must emphasize harmonious coexistence with the natural world, view humans as part of the natural world and acknowledge the rights of the nature to exist. Man-animal conflict, depleting jungles, depleting forests, we all know that. We know the reasons about that as well. An organization can approach sustainability only when it actively integrates environmental concerns into its day-to-day operations. Many organizations like IKEA Furnitures, they started looking for that long back. They went for procedures which were incorporated in due course of time for as far as those kind of measures which were required in future. Then he talks about performance. Corporations are held accountable for their performance. Received economic theory asserts that performance is defined primarily from the point of view of investors as profits or shareholder wealth. Environmentalism suggests that performance is viewed or must be viewed in more holistic terms. If corporations come to accept the fundamental right of nature to exist, it imposes new responsibilities. Indeed, it is clear that organizations produce more than just economic goods. They also produce jobs, they also produce, they give taxes, they are responsible for pollution as well, waste and workplaces. Good returns must therefore be defined not simply as economic returns, but more broadly in terms of socially and environmentally desired outcomes. Changing the measurement criteria. Should organizations be following measurements like GEP associated with that, not resembling it completely, but somehow looking into those kind of details. There are some examples, very short narratives around those examples that many organizations are trying to do that. Green Soul, for example, they recycle discarded shoes and apparel into comfortable footwear, bags, mats and pouches, keeping them away from landfills and provide them to children in need. They are functioning with a good footprint and a good business growth. They also retail sustainable and vegan footwear towards building a self-sustaining social venture. Body Shop is also doing something of that sort, and they say that what they are trying to do, social and environmental dimensions are woven into the fabric of the company itself. Companies, they have started acknowledging, they have started incorporating those things into their systems, and they further say that they are neither first nor last among our objectives, but an ongoing part of everything we do. B Corp, they are also doing many things around their systems. They are businesses that live to the highest social and environmental standards for people and the planet. It's how we have always done business, they say. Community fair trade, recycled plastics and so on. And they're talking about how they are cruelty free. They have a refill scheme in terms of when Body Shop functions go. And you see, there are several functions with State Bank of India, because we have been talking about State Bank of India with reference to their vision, mission, objectives, and we have been using this example longitudinally along our discussion. So, and this is a major and important organization which actually is playing a very big role in economic development of India. So, they have aligned their sustainability initiatives with the national priorities, focusing on achieving much desired sustainable development goals. We are committed to sustainable development goals in this country, and we have aligned all our efforts towards such goals which this world requires. We should speed it up. We should change the complete entire thinking and strategic processes around these, and these are definitely going to contribute into environmental sustainability and the sustainability of business itself. I will be coming back to you with a discussion on factors of environment and how to look at those factors of environment for business sustainability with a strategic approach to reach to our vision in due course of time. I will be catching up back with you with lots of insights. Till then, goodbye.